Gentlemen, a very good afternoon and welcome to ATM, in particular the ATM Hotel Industry Summit. Session 2 today is titled, Thus Putting the Hospitality Back into Hospitality. I think we all know what the problem is. Sanitisation has worked well, but it can be a little bit impersonal. How do you have that magical hospitality touch in an era of COVID? Well, that is a question that we're going to be putting to our panelists today. My name's Richard Dean. I'm a journalist and broadcaster here in Dubai. I present the Business Breakfast radio show. I'm also a director of RAW, an interior design and architecture firm here in Dubai. Now, while it's my job mainly to put the questions to our panelists today, we would also like your help. So, if you've got any comments or questions, we'd love to hear from them, and sooner in the panel rather than later. We don't have to leave them till 25 past 1. If you look in the middle of the room here, and it's all COVID friendly, we've got some microphones. Now, if you've got a question, I will ask intermittently who's got the next question. Stick your hand up, we'll invite you to come to the microphone. After you've finished, someone's going to come along and scrub it down with all kinds of disinfectant, and then it will be ready for the next person. So, are we good to go? Awesome, let's do this. In no particular order, we've got 3 speakers here in Dubai at the World Trade Center today and 1 person joining us by video conference. So let's begin by welcoming, first of all, the CEO of Langham Hospitality Group, joining us from Hong Kong, but no stranger to Dubai, Stefan Lesser. Stefan, join us, please. Ahlan wa sahlan. Also with us today, not from quite so far afield, joining us from up the road in Abu Dhabi, the President and CEO of Rotana. Delighted to have Guy Hutchinson with us. Guy, thank you very much indeed for your time today. And the third of our 3 musketeers here in the World Trade Center today is someone who is currently the Area Vice President for the UAE at Marriott International, but not for long, because as of the 1st of July, he takes on a much, much broader role. He will be the Chief Operating Officer for Marriott International for the Middle East and also Africa. Sandeep Walia, it's great to have you with us. Thank you very much indeed. Have a seat, please, Sandeep. And also joining us via video conference today from 4 Seasons, the President, Hotel Operations, Europe, the Middle East and Africa, Simon Casson. Simon, are you with us? Can you hear us? Can you see us this morning? Hey, Simon.
Good morning, I'm with you. I can see you and hear you, and sorry I'm not there in person, but great to be part of the panel.
Where in the world are you, Simon? Give us a bit of context and colour.
Well, in the past week, I was in Sicily, Rome, Milan, Madrid, but currently I'm spending the holiday weekend at my home in Croatia. I have a country home here, so in Istria, northern Croatia, and heading back to Dubai tomorrow, actually.
It looks absolutely stunning, and we'll be delighted to have you here. So with that, I'm going to go and take a seat with our panelists, and we'll jump into this. Timing was perfect there. Thank you very much indeed. So the question that we're asking is putting the hospitality back into hospitality. And Simon, I'm going to begin with you if I can. A brand that's renowned for its hospitality, for its personal touch, for its intimacy. What has been the problem or the challenge over the past 12 months or so as your hotels are reopened? And what's the latest thinking about how you can solve that problem while still, of course, keeping us all safe?
Well, thanks. Good to field the first question. I mean, the challenges, I think, abound for all of us. And, fundamentally, it comes down to a commercial challenge, which is cash. You have to have the cash to keep a business open. And there's so much that surrounds all that. But, from my fellow leaders there, I know that they will agree that ultimately, as we work with our owner partners, or even if you have your own owned assets, it comes down to your collective ability to keep the hotels open. So that's, I would say, the fundamental challenge over the past year and a half. And, of course, vast majority of our hotels, and we're a relatively small company, closed in the earlier parts of the pandemic, and still a few of them are closed now, although majority are open. So what we had to do was very quickly pivot and figure out how do we go from being hotel operators to really, in the blink of an eye, having to put together processes and procedures for shutting down large numbers of hotels? How did we protect and manage our staff whilst also being, rigorous in shedding cost? And then how did we, sort of shift to prepare for reopening and, changed operators and everything that you have to do to be COVID, exist and lead in a luxury space. So, it's been an incredible time. And, I think it's always the way with crisis that it brings a significant challenge, but also within it, huge opportunity for growth, both on the people and connectivity side, as well as an opportunity to rethink what you do and how you're doing it. And then, of course, commercially, how you can be leaner and fitter as you emerge and have to, make up for the pretty distressing, business climate that we've all endured over the past year and a half. But it sure feels better sitting here now with some green shoots emerging and, travel starting up again than it did sitting here a year ago when uncertainty was much greater.
Thank you very much indeed. We'll have more from Simon a little bit later on. Stefan Lesser, if I can turn to you. You're based in Hong Kong now. Previously, you've been in Dubai, so no stranger here. And I'm wondering how, for Langham, at a very, very high point of luxury, or a relatively small network of hotels, but geographically very, very diverse, your home base of Hong Kong, of course, the original in London in the United Kingdom. How has this story played out for you? And if you can share some insights from Hong Kong, that would be interesting. Maybe a market that we don't know that well, but if we can learn some lessons from it, that would be great.
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for having me. I would have expected Simon to be here, but he knows that. No, I mean, look, we were very early impacted, obviously, to a large extent, because a large part of our portfolio is in mainland China. So very early on in January last year, we saw closing of hotels, but also very much a very quick discipline in terms of wearing masks and fighting the spread of the virus. When you look at Hong Kong, we never really had to stop operating in terms of whether retail were closed or restaurants were closed. We never experienced that. So we have had 14 months of ongoing business, but only local business, so domestic business. And initially especially for the Hong Kong market, when that staycation concept came up, I fell into the pitfall that you normally shouldn't do, that you looked at yourself as the customer. And I said, why would I need a staycation? Why would I need a hotel bed in a city where I have a bed already? But it was very clear that people were looking to go out and do something else. And as Simon has mentioned it, we had to pivot and look at, okay, how do we serve and how do we survive on the business that is there in a local market? The advantage for us with what you said, a relatively small company, 25 properties, but on 4 continents, was that we could share experiences that we made very early on about how to shut operations, how to upgrade health and safety protocols on those around the world when basically then those other regions were impacted. From a staycations perspective, I think what was good, it kept us afloat in Hong Kong. We always had a strong F&B component, and what you see, or what you could see, is that I think we work in an industry that is most likely one of the most stress-resistant industries, because our people are used to deal with not only adversity but also uncertainty. So I think that that's something that is a compliment to maybe the healthcare workers, but also to the hospitality workers in that respect. And so for us, we now see also a very different development in terms of return of business. One area where we are jealous about other regions is the rate of vaccination, because we're not that highly vaccinated, because we don't have had those many cases. And I think we will see right now a race amongst nations in terms of who gets basically the highest rate of vaccination to basically open up for business. And the ones that don't have those high rate of vaccinations will most likely be left behind when business travel returns, or MICE business and other things. And that's one of the things where we are working on in Hong Kong right now, to convince not only the colleagues they're okay, but also then the rest of the population to go through and basically get the shots, and the vaccines would be actually available.
Guy Hutchinson of Rotana, If I can focus first of all on many of your properties here in the UAE, which we know have been busy, particularly beach properties. So the problem I suspect that you've had to face is not a lack of demand, it's how to satisfy that demand and serve your customers, giving them the hospitality experience that you want to give them and they expect, and yet having to be a medical company as much as a hotel company, and to be constantly walking around telling people to put their masks on and don't stand so close to someone else at the buffet. You know, you're being the prefect or the policeman, and also the gracious host. How have you balanced that?
Yes, you know, I think our problem has been slightly different. You know, out of the 70 hotels or 68 hotels we operate, we closed only 2, and those were in very far-flung, remote destinations. So, you know, we've traded at very solid numbers right throughout. And I think, you know, this whole transition, I think a lot of the success, I think, in the current environment has been very much around agility, speed of change, the ability to shift mindset very, very quickly. Because, you know, we've gone through that initial sort of hard shock of, you know, pandemic, crisis management, expense management, operations, new operating model, new operating environment, and now transitioning into what is now normalized operation. You know, through that space, you've had to have very strong discipline around objectivity and mindset change and focus. And keeping that service culture throughout that process has been a huge focus, and it's been probably our biggest challenge, because you also have to bear in mind that in this region, in this part of the world, the way that your workforce is mobilized is different to other parts of the world. Most of it, they're distant from family. So, you know, I'd say probably 80% of the workforce in this part of the world are not directly connected to family. Family's been affected by, you know, particularly in the subcontinent, there's been significant issues. So keeping that service culture and staying close to the frontline staff has been enormously important, because going through all those cycles of, is my job secure? Yes, it is. Is the hotel going to close? No, it's not. You know, do we have a reduction in salary? Maybe for 1 month, but now you're back. You know, now we're normalizing and occupancies are back and restaurants are busy, and keeping that smile on the face, keeping that hospitality culture, keeping that service space has taken an enormous amount of engagement. And what we've done actually very early on is we have abandoned our traditional work structures. And I think it's one of the things that's helped us to cope with. So in senior leadership, you know, whatever your job title was on the 1st of March, on the 1st of April, it changed. And we've adjusted that all the way through to focus on the priorities that the business had at that point, because future visibility has always been tough. So, you know, keeping the workforce engaged with hospitality values despite masks, despite hygiene and disinfection procedures, which I think are some of the best in the world currently in this region. You know, that service culture, we focus on not losing it, because that's the heart of our business, and you know, and it's the reputation of our markets, the reputation of our destinations. So it's been a huge focus. But that emotional engagement with the colleagues, it has been really critical, because keeping them focused at the front line, smiling, serving, despite the personal circumstances which have been heavily affected, has taken work and focus.
Well, Sandeep, it's a similar question to you. As by many measures the world's biggest hotel company, and there are various benchmarks, but let's say, for the sake of argument, the world's biggest hotel company, others look at a company of your scale to take the lead. And you have taken the lead when it comes to safety and security. And yet, when checking into hotels, and I've had this experience and others have, your first experience is you go to check in and there's a damn perspex barrier between you and the person, and then they're wearing a mask and you're going, I'm sorry, what? And then you're in a queue with 3 other people behind you because it's taking a lot longer because you can't communicate. And then you've got security guards telling you to, excuse me, don't stand there, stand over there. And you've only been in the hotel 15 minutes, and it's supposedly a luxury property, and it's just got off to a bad start. I'm exaggerating for effect. It's not always like that, but you know what I mean. How have you juggled these 2 conflicting priorities, hospitality and yet safety?
Good question. I think it's a choice. And what do I mean by that? I think first, very early on we realized that the most important would be communication. So I think if you take cleanliness and hygiene and all the measures we've been talking about for the last few months or almost more than a year now is kind of the basic. And I would say if you had to look at a pyramid, you're kind of moving towards a layer 2, which is about communication. So we did early on make sure that when you are going to be checking in before this queue, which you were talking about, 24, 48 hours before that, you would have a pre-communication which talks about what to expect, what are the different protocols. So a person or a guest who's going to be coming in knows how exactly it's going to be. But I'll come back to my point about choice. I think this pandemic has, some things haven't changed, and some things have just got accelerated. What do I mean by that? Cleanliness, for example, which we've been talking about, it hasn't really changed. It's the focus. If you look at it 10 years back, and you asked guests, and we actually did a survey 10 years back with the luxury guests, and said what are the top 3 things they expect from a luxury hotel, the number 1 was still cleanliness. And today, 10 years hence, it's cleanliness. It's at a different level, it's a different scale, so I don't think it's changed. But what's accelerated is technology. So I think what we're doing is we're trying to cope up with what you're saying is to give guests a choice. The guest today we've gone very contact light. So if you're a Marriott Bonvoy member, you can kind of go on your app, you can do mobile check-in, you can get a mobile key. In fact, 65% of our Europe, Middle East, Africa hotels got mobile key today. That you don't even need to go to the counter and stand and try to talk to the glass. But that's a choice. If I want to so do it that I want to check in before even reaching the hotel, I could use technology to do that. I could be standing in the queue because I don't like technology and I just want to stand there and have an engagement piece with the person behind the counter. Or there are times when we've just moved more ahead and just said, okay, why don't we do the check-in in the room itself? Is it possible for every guest? Not really. But yes, it's possible in some hotels and certain room categories, and that's how we have been trying to balance it out. The other thing, of course, has been that we have turned a lot of concierge desks or sit-down areas into check-in areas as well. So we're able to cope up with the number of people standing in the queue. So that's kind of a few of the ways we've been trying to give choice to the guests to say, do you want to stand in the queue? Do you want to check in the room? Or do you just want to pre-check in and just come in and use your mobile key? So giving it to the guests to decide then.
Well, I'm glad you're getting the hang of that. I checked into a hotel with my family over Eid, somewhere in Abu Dhabi, cluster of hotels, none of your brands, you'd be glad to know. And I haven't had such a grim experience checking in, I think, since I went to summer camp when I was a teenager. It was that bad. Maybe some hotels in Las Vegas. But listen, let's take the first question from the floor if we can. As I say, we're very keen to get as many as possible. Who's got the first question for me? If you raise your hand, I'll direct you to the microphone. We can come back to you in a second, but think of those questions, if you will. I've got loads. I've got thousands of questions. Oh, thank you, sir. If you want to take your position in the middle, the microphone has been cleaned. You can take your mask off to ask the question. Thank you.
Thanks, Richard. Given your focus here on the medical nature, perhaps this panel should have been called Putting the Hospital in Hospitality rather than the Hospitality. That's an aside. There's a question for all 3 gentlemen, but probably mostly for Stefan. Given I've just returned from Hong Kong and had to spend 3 weeks in quarantine, that balance between opening up for business and staying safe. Stefan, I presume that I was working very closely to your hotel in Hong Kong. I presume you will have very strong opinions on this, but Dubai seems to have survived with being open, having 1,000 cases a day. When I was in Hong Kong, they were getting excited if there was 10 or 15. So I'd just be keen to hear from you gentlemen what your thoughts are on that. Thank you.
Yeah. I'm not an expert in terms of how to best manage an outbreak or prevent a potential outbreak, and I can obviously see why the government has taken the approach in Hong Kong they have taken because of the density of populations, the way that basically housing looks like, and if we would have an outbreak, then you would have one basically that may go into the thousands, and basically we didn't want to run that risk. Now, do we take it to extremes? Yes, I've had so far 9 weeks of quarantine. Do I enjoy it? Not necessarily. Does it prevent travel from happening? Absolutely. At the moment, you only can come to Hong Kong if you have residency there, and that definitely means we're closed for business. As I said earlier in my first answer, I think what we're entering right now is a situation where it's all about vaccination and herd immunity through vaccination. Dubai has taken a very aggressive stance on that very early on, and then opened up and done very successfully, as I have seen now firsthand. And I think this will be the part where we enjoyed for the last 14, 15 months what I explained earlier, that we were actually not totally shut down, but now it will be a matter of how quickly do we get into the situation where we can open up for business. We're doing relatively well in China because China has no or very little cases, but also they have a large vaccination job to do. So how much international travel will happen, I don't know. We have a portfolio of hotels in Australia and New Zealand. They have announced that they'll stay closed most likely. You know, I've heard even the name, the time end of 2022, which is hard to imagine for an international travels perspective. What I predict is that North America, Europe, the Middle East, there will be a rebound, a strong rebound happening within the next 2, 3, 4 months. And then I hope that we'll settle on a plateau that is sustainable for that business. We opened up our Langham in London yesterday, and the excitement was great, but yet business needs to come, and particularly to city hotels in Europe, but also in North America.
And I should stress that Stefan told me earlier, he was not in the presidential suite at the Langham when you were quarantining, were you? It was government-appointed hotel, is that correct?
That's correct. But it's a mental exercise. You go in there and you know this is what you have to go through. Is it a pleasant experience? No, it's not. But at the same point in time, if it's part of the deal, then, you know, I think it's the attitude that you need to have, and then you survive it. And I'm still married.
Just a quick word on this from you, Guy, and then we'll move on. I know you've recently returned from a trip to Africa. You've been to the Congo. You're just opening your first hotel in Dar es Salaam, I think quite recently as well. What's been your experience of traveling throughout Africa in terms of different approaches to COVID and quarantine and various different measures or hoops that you've had to jump through?
Look, it's obviously very, very different, you know, and to refer maybe a little bit to the question, I think, you know, it's always that delicate balance between safety, control, and then the ability to do business. And it's one thing that I think this region has done particularly well. But you also have a population in this part of the world that is quite responsible and quite organized and quite structured in its approach to, you know, adhering to regulation and following guidelines. So there's been a number of factors, I think, in this region that's enabled this progress. A, the way that government has handled it, and B, in terms of the way how population and residents have approached the issue, and that's what's facilitated things opening. But that's obviously not the case, and you've seen even if you put Africa to one side, you know, you look at how it's evolved in Europe and in the UK and in the US, where you've had civil unrest around mask wearing, you know, and this is where I think it's much more difficult to manage. Across Africa, my experience is unique. There's some things I can share, some things I won't. but it's obviously a lot less developed, and you have to personally maintain your own bubble as you travel through that's been the key. The Congo, yes. You have to be very, very careful about how you maintain your own bubble. So you travel with your own COVID-19 prevention kit throughout.
We'll move on now to the issue of technology. Simon, in Croatia, how are you doing there?
I'm doing good. I'm loving the perspective. I know it's bothering Stefan that I'm looming large above his head, but happy to be part of it. And, you know, just as a quick aside, Richard, you know, I think it is important, as this guy was saying, that we get back out and travel, that we get back out and see the teams. It's complicated, and, you know, I think I have 12 PCR tests on this journey, but, you know, what a great world that we live in, that I can both be present at hotels here in Europe and be able to participate in a forum like this.
Well, I'm going to ask you, thank you for that segue, because I was going to ask you about technology and the role of technology, because I know at Four Seasons you've made great play of the use of your app, and B, your chat function, which is great, and I admire the way that you're embracing technology. If I could think honestly of a hotel brand less suited to communication through a smartphone, it would be Four Seasons, because the very essence of what you do is that personal level of service. And yet you have managed to nail it. So explain what you've done with technology and some of the challenges you've had to overcome to make it work in a Four Seasons kind of way.
Yeah, it's for sure a conundrum, Richard, because as you say, hospitality generally is inherently human, delivered by people, and is best expressed, with that humanity in play, with human, connection. At the same time, our demographic and guest base is evolving. And, the chat, didn't come about because of COVID. The chat, pre-existed that by a number of years, but really came into play during COVID. And I think the important factor, I think it was Guy also that said, it was Sandeep who said that guests have a choice. And, some will choose an in-person interaction at distance, others will choose remote. Ultimately, it's about what is the means to the end. Our chat is inherently very human. You're speaking or chatting to a real person with simultaneous translation in over 100 languages. So ultimately, I think when I was just at our hotel in Madrid, I'd been on the road and been staying in some places where there was not a Four Seasons, so I'd actually limited options, was staying in a bed and breakfast, arrived in Madrid, needed to get a couple of shirts laundered, was running to meet the GM in the lobby, went on chat, hey, just left some shirts inside my room, light starch on hangers. What makes that human is, firstly, that I know it's going to a real person. Secondly, that they respond back in a very warm and engaging way. And thirdly, that it's not a robot producing that service. And so when the next morning, as I'd requested, 8 a.m., the shirts were at the door, it's because the human connectivity worked behind the technology of the app. And, we're a relatively small company in the region that I run, Europe, Middle East, and Africa. I only, oversee 41 hotels. We're small, but we had over, 60 million individual usages on the app last year. And so I think it shows that people are comfortable to use technology, but not to use it to replace service. Because, whatever service you're asking for, you will know if you get a scripted response back that's from a bot rather than from a human being, because it's personalized and it's engaging in a more real way. And ultimately, the service that you're asking for on an app or any other technology interface, ultimately, whether it gets delivered or not, and delivered on time, hot if hot, cold if cold, pressed if pressed, is the defining factor of whether the service works. And as we all know, luxury, is expressed in many different ways, but in every form, it's underpinned by 1,000 little details that have to go right every day. And only if all those details go right can you then elevate it with, memorable moments and special touches. And so we looked really carefully about how technology can be an aid and a support to the delivery of human-focused service.
Thanks for that, Simon. It's difficult enough for Simon with one brand or with Stefan with one brand, but for you, Sandeep, at Marriott, so many different brands. The latest figure I have is that in your new role, you'll have 147 properties, 21 different brands. And I imagine the way that you communicate or pre-communicate, to your phrase, with clients will differ greatly depending on whether it's a luxury brand or a mid-scale brand. But even if we just look within luxury, within your portfolio, before your UAE role, you were running the luxury hotels for the region, they'll all have their subtle nuances on how you do this. Just to rattle off the list, Ritz-Carlton, Bulgari, St. Regis Edition, the Luxury Collection, JW Marriott, and W. And they're all slightly subtly different. So how do you manage that within different luxury hotels, but then in the 4-star, the 5-star, the 3-star categories?
Sure. First, I would start by saying that it's the different brands. It's like a swimming pool where you have different swim lanes. And the swim lanes, when you're at the top, you can see the ropes. They're clearly demarcated, and there's a swimmer in every lane. And I think the brands are similar. It's a swim lane. It's the same company, but it's totally, when you see from the outside, you can clearly differentiate between the different brands. But when you go deep into the water, there's a bit of water blurring, and that's where we say in terms of some of the disciplines, whether it's finance, whether it is admin roles, they could be a bit of a blur. So from the top, for sure, we need to deliver as per what the brand stands for. But I'll come back to the fact that what's the most important to the brands? End of the day, as Marriott, today we have 30 brands globally, and we only own brands. We don't own hotels. We manage hotels. So who's really the brand? It's the people. And people are the most important to our business, to any brand, to any hotel industry or company that we take. People are the most important. So I think it's that training to the people, how they're delivering to the expectation of the guest when he or she walks into a St. Regis gate or a door versus a loft or an element, and that becomes the most important. Because tomorrow when you walk into, let's say, a Ritz-Carlton and you have a bad experience, guess when you leave, you're going to say, you know what, Ritz-Carlton was a bit iffy. And when you have a great experience at the St. Regis, you're going to talk high about the brand. But end of the day, it's that person who delivered it. So the most important becomes the training to the people where we are able to differentiate between the different brands. Besides, of course, the product and the brand standards that we have, it's people who are holding it together. So I would say people are the most important to holding brands separately.
A couple of final questions on this, the issue of how you communicate with your guests. For you, Guy, a couple of things. You've recently expanded. You've opened your first hotel in Dar es Salaam. You were in Africa last week. You've also opened a hotel in Sarajevo, so you're getting into Europe as well. So that's geographic diversification. You also have different sub-brands within the Rotana portfolio. And I was reading recently, is it 5 hotels that you've entered into with franchise agreements, which again is a different dynamic to manage. So just briefly, I don't want to labor this point too much, but briefly, how do you approach that diversity?
You know, I think similar to what Sandeep was saying, you know, I think it's your organizational culture is what brings delivery and what brings quality and what brings service. So talking a little bit to what Sandeep said and maybe a little what Simon says, you know, it's that human touch, it's that physical presence. What we've always been super effective at is localization. So, you know, that's the core of what we've been able to do. It's what's driven our business even in the UAE, and it's also underpinned our success here over the last 12 or 15 months through the pandemic, is the strength of our connection with local markets, the strength of our engagement with local customers, and our physical presence in our hotels. And we've replicated that through expansion. So into Sarajevo, I've been there 3-4 times, into Africa, Tanzania, you know, so being present on the ground, driving those local connections, establishing that local cultural connections. We've done it in Marrakesh also over the last 12 or 15 months. You know, technology is amazing. I think we all have probably a little bit of Teams fatigue. But you know, ultimately, in our business, it's a very emotional, it's a very human-driven business, and I don't personally believe that there's a replacement for physical presence in terms of how you engage with teams, how you engage with leadership, and how you engage with local investors, local culture, local communities, local stakeholders. And that's always been our DNA. And whether it's focus service or extended stay or 5-star, you know, we drive that culture in the same way.
Stefan, a related but slightly different question to you. I was reading in one of your recent interviews, you said you've noticed a real upsurge in uber luxury, in private jet travel, in people staying in larger suites. I know you recently opened in Munich, forgive my pronunciation, the Nymphenburg, which is a 9,000 square foot residence. I didn't even have the nerve to Google how much that cost a night, but it's clearly extremely expensive, people spending a lot of money, but that demands a certain level of service and communication, which is difficult at the best of times, but behind a mask is even more so. How, as guests move even further up market, how do you manage this?
Yeah, I mean, service delivery in that ultra-luxury setting is obviously something that you have almost to create a bubble that people feel safe in terms of how to interact, and nothing is off limits in terms of wishes in that price bracket. We've seen that demand and a lot of the requirements that came. We saw that obviously that also other operators and offerings have taken advantage of that. I know that in the Maldives, situations where people almost rented islands for a certain period of time, and there is this demand out there. I think the demand has always been there because you can see it in the private yacht charter business, which is in the around about the same price points. But I also now see that the land component and we're only doing that in very relevant cities where you have the proximity to the city center, but at the same point in time, the privacy of offering a villa, but with not only just rental services, but the luxury services that you would expect. And I would differentiate between the delivery of service and the delivery of hospitality. And I think service is something that you can measure, and hospitality is something that you feel. And for us, in setting those environments, delivering it through the Langham-Nymphenburg residence in Munich is something where people will come back because of they really felt that this is their home away from home. And price points are not that relevant in that. It's more about, was that what the client was looking for, the guest was looking for, and did we deliver and meet the expectations? Yes, the price points are beyond my comprehension, but that's just the way it is, and there is a market out there, and we're very happy to deliver against that. We will open up a second one, also in a German city, in Berlin, and we have a few more on the plans. And I'm very excited about that segment of our offering.
Nymphenburg, I think I nailed it. I knew my German GCSE would come in handy one day, and this is that day, age 49. Can we get some more questions from the floor, please? We've got about 20 minutes left. We'd love to get your thoughts, your comments, your observations. Who's got the next question for our panelists? As I joked earlier on with the audience, if these guys were consultants, they'd be charging you thousands of dollars an hour to answer a question. So you can do it for free now. Who's got the next question? I've got plenty of them. Going once, going twice, no worries. Well, oh, yes, please, sir. Thank you. Our friend from Belgium, I believe. Thank you very much indeed. Welcome back. You can keep your mask off to ask the question because the microphone has and will be sanitized. Your brief question.
Yeah, I will not ask the same question like a few hours ago. I'm from Belgium, 6 cents, 40 years in the business, and well, we know Four Seasons as well. I was very active in the MICE. So I was at the last luxury Cannes fair, and there was a great speaker about the changement of asking about luxury goods and the moving. And then he said, we expect in the coming years, of course now with COVID, between 80 million and 100 million of Chinese who are going to travel. My son works next to the Four Seasons in Bangkok for the Capella, and it's very quiet there for the moment. Also, he told me that that is the market they focus on. Is that really the new market?
I'm going to throw that one, if I can, at Sandeep, given that the organization you work for has the greatest range of all of our panelists today.
Yeah, I think somewhere, as I was mentioning earlier, that this pandemic has speeded up or accelerated a few things. And I would say it also has accelerated the fact that product luxury is moving to experiential luxury. And I think that's what you're referring to when you were talking about the Chinese, that they were moving from always rushing to the Louis Vuitton shops or to buying watches, to bags. They were moving towards experiences. What we see, and what I personally believe strongly about, is the fact that it's only going to get speeded up even more when the travel opens even further. And we saw this, or we have seen this in UAE, where we are very fortunate to be here. I think the leadership has done a brilliant job in how they've contained things, how they've opened up stuff. And there is a pent-up demand. And as soon as you open a country like we have, you suddenly see leisure flowing in. And I think it's not a new fact that leisure is going to be first, and then it's going to be corporate, and then groups. But in the leisure segment, the rates we are getting are higher than 2019 in the luxury segment. And that kind of leans towards what you were saying, that product luxury is speeding up, moving into experiential luxury. It had already started. We had started to see that, people, the younger generation as well, beside the Chinese, and a lot of the Chinese travelers tend to be also in the younger generation bracket. I would say younger at heart. I'm not referring to age here. And they were more saying, listen, instead of buying this bag to the husband, listen, take me for a vacation and let's go and experience Europe or Middle East or Maldives. It might be different that they reach there and then she says, buy me the bag too, but that's different. But it is moving towards that experience, and I think it's only going to get speeded up. So back to your question, I strongly believe that's the trend, and it's going to only increase.
Thank you very much indeed. Thank you for the question as well. Let me ask the panel about food and beverage when it comes to putting the hospitality. In fact, before I do that, actually, Stefan, a quick word on China, because you live in Hong Kong.
Yeah, I guess what I would want to add is that what we need to realize is that China has functioned for the last 99 months almost normal. And what we've seen is that Shanghai, which I think is at the moment one of the most vibrant, if not the most vibrant city in the world, that there is a change in also the consumer behavior. The younger generations, whether we call them Generation Z or millennials or whatsoever, they're out, they're a lot more extroverted, they're a lot more demanding, they're a lot quicker in terms of requesting. F&B plays a large role. Technology plays an enormous role in that. So I think that by the time that the Chinese will basically come to us, it's a very different clientele from a markets and from a expectations profile perspective than what we've seen before the pandemic. We've seen that shift within the last 9 months. I mean, we had big events happening. There was the Shanghai Fashion Show, the Auto Show, and all those things that we cannot imagine that they're happening in that. No masks, and basically that market has developed over those 9 months. And the numbers are big, and absolutely to the question, this will come our way, but it will come in a very different way than it was before the pandemic.
Thank you very much indeed. 1:15, I think I'm just feeling hungry, which is why I'm going to move the conversation onto the role of F&B in re-injecting hospitality back into hospitality. Guy Hutchinson, I'm going to start with you. I was reading your bio earlier on today and noticing that the Hilton Dubai Creek 20-odd years ago, you were the man responsible for bringing Gordon Ramsay to Dubai, one of the first celebrity chefs to come to Dubai. Now, I know for a fact that at least 3 people in this room were at those launch parties. You were, I was, and Dan, who asked the first question, was as well, because I worked with him at the time in hospitality journalism. But do celebrity chefs still have the same allure and appeal to up your hospitality level? And if not, what within the F&B space does the trick? Where does the magic lie in terms of F&B now?
I think that's $1 million question, right? I think, yes, the signature chef or the celebrity chef definitely has a place. Definitely has a place. I think that profile or that place is greatly reduced over time. If you think of where that was placed 10 or 15 years ago to where that is today, I think that influence is greatly reduced, but still there is absolutely, in terms of the quality of the operations and innovation, there is absolutely a place for the celebrity chef. But I think it's more now a hybrid solution. And if you look at markets like Dubai, which I think was probably one of the most vibrant F&B markets in the world, outside of possibly Shanghai, where I was also, or Hong Kong, that intermix between self-run restaurants, great concepts, concepts which are driven on the quality of the concept rather than the name of the chef, and you'll see a number of those in the worlds of Zuma and Koya. These come to mind, where they've got these really great F&B concepts that have amazing traction, but you don't know the name of the chef, right? So I think there's that balance. It's still an incredible important part of the region. It's about 50% of our income is coming through food and beverage. And from about August of last year, it's absolutely what has sustained our profitability as a company, the speed and recovery of food and beverage.
But that is in-house Rotana-operated food and beverage.
Yes. Yeah. I mean, right now, 95% of food and beverage that we operate it's all in-house and it's all developed in-house, and we have a team of architects, designers, corporate chefs who are involved in building concepts, executing concepts, and rolling them out, and keeping them refreshed. We spend a lot of time and attention on R&D, on research and development, because your concept of 2 years ago, 2 years later, is no longer relevant. But Dubai, I think, and the UAE has been very successful in creating a platform of quality F&B, and you've seen that traction throughout. There's some amazing F&B in this region, and it's still fundamental to hospitality and operations. With other parts of the world, it's less fundamental.
Maybe we've moved on from celebrity chefs to celebrity butchers now with the success of Salt Bay, which is next door to Koya here in Dubai, up at the Four Seasons, which brings me to you, Simon Casson, the role of F&B within re-injecting hospitality. Not re-injecting, but what's the title again? Let me be precise. Putting hospitality back into hospitality, and the role of F&B. How do you balance bringing in these third-party concepts to developing your own? What do you think is the secret sauce or the magic blend, perhaps?
I think it's looking at what the consumers want rather than what we might want as hoteliers. And when we created the Jumeirah Beach Resort, it was the first luxury hotel in Jumeirah 1 on its own natural beach. And we knew we'd built in some really amazing factors like Mercury Rooftop Bar and our beachfront restaurant, but we needed to create a center of gravity. Not many cities have the capacity of Dubai to be able to be attracted to and support the level of luxury restaurants that the city has. And so it was a little bit of a risk to put together, Koya and Nusret, high profile brands. We now have Namos, Beach Club on our estate as well. But there's no restaurant turns over more in Dubai than Nusret, and there are many much larger restaurants. So I think it shows the demand is there for quality. And of course, there's a celebrity element. I mean, my friend Nusret is the master of that. But I think from the consumer's point of view, celebrity is secondary to being a great cook. Great food, great tastes, textures, and of course, all sort of curated within that environment. And, just relating food and beverage back to the point that you were alluding to before, Richard, on exclusivity, it has been a big mainstay of attracting, people to our brands during lockdown. In Paris, where there's very little business in Paris, we've consistently been doing private suite dinners with open terraces looking onto Tour d'Eiffel. And many of our hotels in European cities have kept their food and beverage open, even if there was no demand for rooms. So exclusivity, I think, does reign. I mean, just to briefly reconnect with that, we have a private island in the Maldives, Voavar, first thing to go. In Cap Ferrat, we have, a 5-bedroom private villa within our gardened estate. First thing to go. Four Seasons private jet at, over $300,000 a ticket for a couple. High demand and always, sold out. We have a new jet coming on to market later this year. So I think exclusivity really, really important. I think it does link to food and beverage. And if I could suggest one trend, it's not really a trend, it's more sort of, a growing part of lifestyle, is plant-based food and beverage. And we've pioneered at the Jumeirah Beach Resort there in Dubai, a partnership with Matthew Kenny from Folia, full plant-based menu, and we're sort of rolling that out into a number of our hotels, reflecting lifestyle choices that the guests are increasingly expressing.
Simon, thank you very much indeed. Stefan, a similar question to you about F&B. And I noticed when I was researching this meeting that you've got a hotel in Jakarta, is it either opening soon or recently opened. And you've got Tom Akins, who's a celebrity chef, but you've also got Morimoto there, the Japanese restaurant. And the reason that resonated with me, as you may well know, Morimoto opened in Dubai recently and closed recently. Very strong concept, very strong reputation globally. I went to the restaurant, it's a gorgeous place, and the food was fabulous. Didn't work for whatever reason. So your thoughts on the celebrity chef idea, and then more generally?
Yeah, we have various collaborations, and I think the secret is in the word collaboration. If I look at our Langham in London, where we work closely with Michel Roux, he's there. It's a very strong collaboration, and he's an ambassador, and he's involved, and that makes a difference. What I would say to the Morimoto case is we're opening only in the second half of this year, so we will see. I think what we need to do is look at concepts and yes, scratch them if they don't work, right? And I think there the secret is more in terms of, from an owner-operator perspective, that we don't invest enormous amounts of fit-out costs that are only working for one specific concept, because then you're taking a very high risk from an investment's perspective. And as Simon rightly said, it's in the end, it's the consumer that basically makes it a success or not. You know, it's the guests that come, that like the concept, whether the food is great or not, they will decide in terms of whether it becomes a commercial success. And so from that aspect, we're always looking at being nimble in terms of moving concepts in, but also moving concepts out. We have one area where we have a very strong expertise in-house and have rolled that out through all of our properties, especially in Asia. This is Cantonese fine dining cuisine. We have 3-star Michelin restaurants, and they're doing incredibly well. F&B in Asia also serves a very different role as it does here in Dubai. It's a profit contributor. You have other areas where F&B is something that you need to offer, but it's very difficult to actually make money in operating F&B in your hotels. And there you need to find the fine balance. And if you just take in a concept or a celebrity chef to put a label out on the door, I'm not sure, and maybe that's what Guy was also saying, I'm not sure that that's the concept of the future. I think those times might have been departed.
Sandy, from your perspective, particularly with your high-end brands, and we mentioned some of them, you're essentially a Ritz-Carlton guy, are you not? Is that fair to say?
That's where I started.
That's where you started, yeah. But I'm sure you love all your children equally.
Exactly.
But within your high-end portfolio, how are you approaching F&B?
Yeah, I think everybody, all my colleagues have said, it's not a cookie-cutter approach. I think it's depending on where the city and where we are opening the restaurants. It depends upon the chef. Just by getting a celebrity chef is no confirmation of success or failure. I think you can do it either ways. But I think what's becoming more and more important is the fact that in the luxury space, while rooms were historically the focus, food and beverage is becoming more and more important. A lot of guests today choose a hotel or choose between 2 luxury hotels depending on what food and beverage is available and what the options are. So for sure, food and beverage is kind of gaining popularity for sure in terms of choosing hotels itself. So a very important decision in terms of where and what to be open. In terms of concepts, in terms of...
Well, very quickly, let me ask you for an example. Within your portfolio here in the UAE with those high-end brands, if you point to a success story within F&B, maybe you could give us an example of something that's worked really, really well. I'm not saying it can be a model for everyone going forward, but an example of something that's really worked.
Sure. And I think I'll answer that question with 2 examples. One is an example of a restaurant that has opened years back, and it still continues to be full every evening, and that's Buddha Bar at Grosvenor House. Again, everything comes together, the ambience, the music, the chef, the food. And I'll give another example, which is more recent, which is Akira Beck at W Palm, where, again, it's doing very well, both indoor dining and outdoor dining. And something similar to what Simon said, that even when we had to close the hotel for a few months in between due to COVID, there was a lot of demand, and we did do catering to homes with Akira Beck on the move. So yes, I mean, those would be 2 examples of the question you asked.
Thank you very much indeed. We are almost out of time, and I know people have got meetings to go to, so we'll wrap this up shortly. One last opportunity for someone on the floor to ask a very quick question. Yes, please. Just a quick question, if you can come to the microphone. Thank you very much.
Rashi Sen, Travel and Tourism News Middle East. My question is about distribution. Do you see distribution evolve? How do you see it evolve? I mean, we know that hotels will obviously try to sell more and more through their own platforms. Do you see that change in the region?
Guy, do you want to have a stab at that one?
Actually, that's a great question, Rashi. And I think one of the things that we are really laser focused on at the moment is carrying forward what we've seen happen with distribution across the last 12 months. What we've seen over the last 12 months is an enormous, rapid escalation, sometimes 5 or even 10 times the production of our brand distribution versus third party. Now,
really?
Yes, it's been phenomenal. And I know through talking to airline, I know with our airline partners, that has been the same trend. So the role of third-party distribution has changed fundamentally across the period of the pandemic.
Do you have a theory as to why?
There's clearly a skewing of the dynamic because right now in most of these jurisdictions, local markets are playing a big role. So local markets have more connectivity to a brand, and local markets are booking more readily and quickly on brand distribution versus a third party. International travel tends to drive maybe a little bit more booking trend to third parties. But we are super focused. In fact, we've had project teams working on this for the last 4 months to look at how do we know that when international markets fully reopen, some of this shift is going to naturally balance out. But our focus is very much on how do we continue to hold on to the share of direct distribution moving forward. So it's been one hesitates to say anything positive in relation to the pandemic, but as one thing from a distribution perspective, proprietary distribution has immeasurably escalated in contribution.
I see Stefan nodding as well on that one. Just 30 seconds on this.
Yeah, I think it has all to do with disintermediation, and people just wanted to talk to you directly, and they trust that the answers that they get from you are the ones that they can rely on. And that ability to have that direct communication was the strongest pull, and I'm absolutely with Guy, and we need to make sure that we hold on to that we don't let that large customer base leave again and look through third parties.
Right, and we're almost out of time. I'm going to finish by asking each of our panelists to give me just 30 seconds their one bold prediction when it comes to putting the hospitality back into hospitality for the rest of 2021 and into 2022. Sandeep, you can go first on this one.
I think I would just connect to the last conversation we were having about bookings, and I would say that for us, Marriott Bonvoy, which is our loyalty program, which we have seen a huge increase as well in terms of both bookings, is one trend we see with today about 150 million members, that it's only going to continue. What we've seen, of course, is that a lot of our guests who are regular want to earn the points while they're traveling, but they're spending more and more, not only on stays, but on food and beverage, on experiences that we are bringing onto the Marriott Bonvoy platform. So a lot of growth we see coming through the loyalty program as well.
Guy?
I don't think hospitality has ever lost their hospitality. Hospitality is a really resilient industry and gone through pandemic, gone through world wars, and I think keeping true to your values, keeping true to your culture, connecting with your local markets, hospitality is always in hospitality. And the human race is a remarkably resilient species, and I think we're going to reclaim our space quickly and rapidly.
Stefan Lesser.
Yeah, I think there is a strong desire and pent up demand to go out there and celebrate and interact. And there might be and I hope that there is a higher level of appreciation. And I'm very much looking forward to that. I've seen it in China happening, and now I think the next thing within the next couple of months we will see the same thing not only happen in the Middle East, but in Europe and North America. And I'm very excited to see that happening.
And we'll give the final word to our Croatian correspondent, Simon from Four Seasons, your 30-second prediction.
Thank you, Richard. I would say without a loyalty program, we've seen an incredible, connection with loyalty of our guests. And I think all my colleagues on the panel there have said a similar thing. It's about trust in travel and brand equity. And the reason that people are coming to us more directly is because they want to engage personally. They want to ensure their experience. I see an incredibly bright future, certainly in the rare space that we occupy in luxury. There's this phenomenal about, double budget trips, pent-up desire, a desire for larger rooms and suites than they've had before. And our hotels are generally built with very generous room sizes, footprints, outdoor spaces. And people, I think, are yearning for it. As one of my colleagues said, we're in a timeless business. We've been around. Our teams and people are passionate and dedicated, are ready more than ever to serve and to welcome, and to do so in a safe way. So excited for the future and see great things ahead for our industry.
Well, much as all of our 4 panelists have many wonderful, iconic luxury properties in their portfolios, your holiday home in Croatia looks absolutely stunning, Simon. So we'll let you get back to that and enjoy a long, leisurely lunch and wish you a safe journey back to Dubai. But for now, thanks to all of our panelists, to Simon from Four Seasons, to Stefan from the Langen, to Guy from Rotana, and Sandeep from Marriott. Thank you very much indeed. Shukran jazilan.
Thank you.
Thank you.